Hello and welcome. You're on StratNews Global. New week, new beginnings, and I hope everyone watching this program now and later are safe, are staying home, masking up, sanitizing, and of course taking all precautions possible in the midst of a raging pandemic that is right now devouring a lot of lives as well as affecting a lot of people across India and of course across the globe. Well, apart from the pandemic, there is also the northern neighbor that India has, and smaller countries like Nepal and Bhutan has, and that is China. China is an expansionist country with an expansionist mindset, and is always hungry for land and spaces, even if they are in maritime domain, like in the South China Sea. So today, on our live programming, The Gist, we are discussing the land grab by China in Bhutan. You're on The Gist. So, as I mentioned, even as the pandemic rages across the globe, China is relentless in its quest for more land, more space, both on land as well as in the maritime domain, whether it's in South China Sea, East China Sea, or around India, or even the smallest country, perhaps Bhutan. This evening, we are discussing the land grab that China has done in the northern areas of Bhutan since 1990s, but more particularly since 2015. And to discuss the Chinese mindset, the status of the China-Bhutan boundary talks, we couldn't have had a better person than specialist in Tibetan and Chinese affairs, Claude Arpi, joining me from Aruville in Pondicherry, and of course an old friend and a regular on our programs, both on StratNews Global, live programming and otherwise. Welcome, Claude, to this program. But before I come to you,
Thank you.
let me talk about what exactly we are going to discuss and set the tone for our discussion. So, actually, this program is based on two reports. One that we had done on StratNews Global about 10 days ago about how China is putting pressure on Bhutan in their latest talks of the experts group meeting that happened in Kunming between 6th and 9th April. But we'll come to that later. The latest report on all this is come in the Foreign Policy magazine, and it talks about the Beul area, which is in northern Bhutan, north central Bhutan, you can say, where Chinese have built three new villages. Two are already occupied, inhabited. One more is under construction. Two administrative offices of the Communist Party are already up and running. 66 miles of roads are already constructed by the Chinese there. And of course, they were inaugurated by a high ranking Chinese official not very long ago. Five military outposts have been established there, communication bases are there, satellite receiving station has been seen. And China claims these are parts of the TAR, or the Tibetan Autonomous Region, and not Bhutan. Whereas this is inside Bhutan, according to all accounts that Foreign Policy magazine has put out. And of course, analysts and China Bhutan watchers know that this is particularly done to gain some advantage or a bargaining chip for China's aims and objectives in Western Bhutan, which is their main objective, where there's a tri-junction between India, China, and Bhutan. I want to refer to the Foreign Policy magazine's screen grabs that we have for you, but that will come to it later. But Claude, your first thoughts. You've read the article in Foreign Policy magazine. Of course, it is not very old kind of a construction that they're talking about. It's about 6 years ago that they started. But for someone like you, this is not new. This has been happening since 1990, right?
Yeah, that land grabbing has been happening, and but what is relatively new, let's say 2016-17, is the new villages that China has been building in Tibet, and according to their own statistics, 965 villages have been built during the 13 5-year plan. Means in 5 years, 965 and more than 2.6 lakhs of people have been relocated in these villages. Now they are called Xiaokong villages because they are supposedly to help people to come out of poverty. Now China said that they liberated Tibet 70 years ago. This month is anniversary of the 70 years of the 17 Points Agreement, which sealed the fate of the Tibetan. Now, why we could ask why so much poverty after 70 years?
70 years, yes.
Whatever. I just want first to compliment the author of this report. It's quite a remarkable report. That Robbie Barnett, who had been in the 80s associated with Tibet Information Network, who did very, very good work at that time, Matthew Akester, they are really extraordinary scholars. They did a very, very good job. You have to listen to each program of the Chinese TV. You have to translate it. You have to follow the Tibetan press, the Chinese press. So, and moreover, you have to tally the names. It's something which may seem strange, but the Chinese, whenever they come to a place, they change the names. 2-3 years ago, there was a report, a news report, that in Tawang, they have given 6 new names to the
villages.
One of them is the very famous Tupa, the Gorsam Choten, which is near Zimintang. One was that lake that the army people call the Maduri Lake.
Maduri Lake.
But they, instead of the traditional Mompa Lake, they have given their own name. They have done it earlier in 1954 in the first incursion of the Chinese was in Barauti in today's Uttarakhand. They call it Vuje. And it confused No and the Indian negotiator for a couple of years. What is this Vuje? It has always been called Barauti. So the same way in this place where they have built these 2 or 3 villages, now in that area is called Pehul in Tibetan and in Bhutanese, they have changed the name, so which is confusing more the issue.
So therefore, the article is extremely important. Can we have the article if our backroom crew can get us the video of the article? Can we scroll that article, which will give us the idea of how much work has gone into it? In fact, this is the article in Foreign Policy. Entire villages in another country's territory is what it says. China is building entire villages in another country's territory. And as it goes along, there's a lot of details there, a lot of maps. This is the picture these are the maps which we also had done about 6 months ago or 7 months ago, where Pasamlung is also mentioned. And of course, you see in the western side, the dispute is there. There is a dispute in the north and the central sector of the Bhutan-China border. And there is a new dispute that has been brought up by the Chinese in the eastern sector at Sakteng, which we'll talk about. But go further up on that article, if we can go and look at that old map that is there, which was first published or shown by the Chinese in 1980. If you can go up a little bit, this whole scrolling, if we can go up a little bit, then we'll know exactly that map that even Claude has been talking about. But we'll come to that. But Claude, let me come to the particular. These are the things that they are showing now. What it was in 2003, what it is now in 2021. So much of construction has happened. Google Earth images have been collected by the authors, and they are showing this now that nothing existed in 2003, and in 18 years, new villages have been put up inside Bhutan, is what Foreign Policy magazine claims. So clearly, the Chinese are going about it in a very systematic manner. Now, if you go up further up, and look at the map that we'll come to it shortly. This map, yes. This map, Claude, can you explain a little bit about the significance of this map, in fact?
Nobody knows the exact origin of this map, but it appears first in the 1980s, early 1980s. And it showed the claim of Chinese claim over the Bhutanese territory. In my view, my guess is that it's also corresponding to the beginning of the talks between Bhutan and China on the border issue, which is 1984. So they start claiming area which they've not claimed earlier. And the foreign policy article shows some maps of 1980-81, which were published by the government of the Tibetan Autonomous Region, which didn't show this claim of Payul in the central sector of Bhutan. And same thing for Shaktang in the eastern sector. So most of this claim became after or when the talk started with Bhutan. Now, I was very intrigued by this map, and 7-8 years ago, I asked someone to translate them into English. And what it says for Shaktang, as well as for Payul, the central sector, it's the same thing. They said this territory have belonged to China since immemorial times. The fact that China was nowhere to be seen before 1951, that is not taken into account. And they make 2 points, interesting points. They say there is some monastery in these places which are affiliated with monastery in Tibet. The Shaktang monastery is very tiny, and I should have brought the photo. It's tiny monastery in Shaktang, which is affiliated to the Tawang big monastery.
Tawang, of course, is in India. So, they also want, and Saktang, sorry to interrupt you, but Saktang has no contiguity with the Chinese border. It is actually with India, the Saktang sanctuary, wildlife sanctuary. And yet they are claiming it because you are saying that they are saying it is affiliated to the Tawang monastery, right?
That whatever has been one day part of Tibet, or whatever Tibet has claimed one day, becomes part of China because so that is the rule. I mentioned Barauti. Some Tibetan traders started coming to Niti and said that we should move the border. The British say absolutely no. They were very firm. They kicked them out. But after that, it became part of the Chinese territory because in 1890, some traders have said one day, oh, this place must be Tibetan. So whatever Tibet has one day claim, and between Tibet and India, there was discussion. There's one place in Ladakh, in north of Pangong Lake, Dokpo Karpo, it's called, and that is place have been discussed between 1918 and the independence, 1947, has been discussed every year or 2 years. It was discussed by official of Tibetan government and the official of British India.
Right.
So there was no need of an army or to bring the artillery or to bring the tanks or there was dispute, like you have dispute between neighbors. And
yes.
So the first point is that this monastery, that one Lalong, a small monastery, according to the article in Foreign Policy, it's a very dilapidated state. These monasteries are affiliated to a monastery in Tibet.
Right. And that's why they're claiming it.
China considers as Tibet. That is. Second point, they said that there was some Tibetan herders from Ladakh, that county north of Bhutan, which is also the very sacred area for the Tibetan. That these villagers or nomads use the grazing, the pasture to graze their yaks. But if you look at the Himalaya, the history of the Himalaya, everywhere, in every sector, whether it's in Ladakh, in East Ladakh, or in Bomla or Tawang, or there was people for some time, for 10, 15 years, they had an agreement between the village. You can graze, you can send your yaks, this thing. So because at some point in time in 1920, some elders from Tawang went to Shaktang. it became part of them.
Part of
Now,
that's
and to come back to the monastery, it's like you have Goa, you have so many churches which are affiliated to Rome. Does it mean that Goa belongs to the Vatican
Portuguese
state?
or
So it's the
Vatican
same
state.
argument, same argument, which has not
Yeah.
real legal validity, but China is occupying these places.
Occupying that. So that's what I was coming to. That the salami slicing tactics of the Chinese is not new. They've done that in India. They've done that in India. They've done that in South China Sea. What does a small country like Bhutan do? I mean, why is it that the Chinese are now putting pressure on the Bhutanese, extreme pressure to come to an agreement, start diplomatic relations? And I'll before I come to you and ask you that question. I want to show you what we had done. I mean, at least the points culled from the report that I had done just about a week ago, where there was an experts group meeting between Chinese and Bhutanese officials in Kunming between April 6 and April 9. If we can have the second set of graphics, that will actually make clear what the Chinese wanted from the Bhutanese, and yet they stood firm. See, the Chinese said that Sakteng Wildlife Sanctuary is theirs, and you have already explained in adequate terms why it is so. The second point the Chinese wanted the Bhutanese to accept was that the boundary between Bhutan and China in the western sector began from Mount Gipmochi or Gamochen as we know it, and that's because they want more concessions in Doklam. And of course, they want to change the entire framework of discussion between Bhutan and China. This is what happened at those talks. Fortunately, Bhutan has stood firm so far, Claude. But do you think that the Chinese are now upping their game? Are they bringing in extreme pressure on Bhutan because they want to grab more land, not just in the central sector, but in the western sector mostly, and central sector or the eastern sector is just a bargaining chip? What is your view?
I went to Bhutan in 2016 and I had discussion with some of these officials. And interestingly, nobody would say the word China. They all called northern neighbor. So I said,
Okay.
why? This everyone is nervous because you understand that it's very difficult for them to deal with a bully like China. If the American or if India in East Ladakh, it's going through a tough time dealing with China. You can't expect a small Buddhist country to have 50,000 Javan and officer and tanks and artillery to stop the Chinese, and the Chinese are very well aware of that. Regarding that Payul, that central sector, I think till recently, and it's what has changed, and it's what has strategic implication for India, that it was sort of a bargaining chip, as you mentioned, for what really interests the Chinese is the tri-junction, is Batangla, Dokala, and this area, as well as the space between Har district and Chumbi Valley. Because if you look at the map, the road in the Chumbi Valley from Yatong to Paris is extremely close. It's only 1 or 2 kilometers from the Bhutanese claim, and that India is supporting. So they want some buffer. So they want to enlarge that area as well as the area near the tri-junction. So they don't care much for Payul, because first they are atheists. They don't care for the sacredness of the place. Whether there was Guru Padma Sambhav or great yogis who live there, this is not their problem. But they are interested by that Batangla, Doklam area, as well as the other area on the north, that Doklam Plateau.
Yes.
And now apparently China was ready to exchange that Payul, that central sector, against
Doklam.
if they have started building in 2017 the road,
17.
Wu Jingche, the party secretary of the Tibet Autonomous Region, went in 2020 to inaugurate. He he crossed two passes, and he went to that first village. It means that they will never go, in my opinion.
They'll go back from there. Yes.
Once they have put some structure, and Bhutan doesn't have the muscle, or the army, Royal Bhutanese Army cannot go there and just throw them out. And as explained also by Robbie Barnett in his report, the access is much more difficult from the Bhutanese side. The platoons have to walk a few days to reach these places, while from the Chinese side, not Tibetan side, they can come rather easily, and they have done 6 roads, so it's not that difficult.
That's
So
the old.
somehow they have changed. They don't want to exchange anymore. They want to bully
They
more.
want to stay there also, and they want to
put pressure on Bhutan, and it's very difficult for the Bhutanese to
withstand that.
They see what has happened to Nepal, and there's also some people in Bhutan thinking that the other option would be to like Sikkim, that we would merge with India. There's also that fear, so they want to remain neutral, and we understand why. But they're facing a big bully.
They are facing a big bully, and the big bully is using the old playbook in the new playground. Like you mentioned, Beul was actually a bargaining chip, but now they seem to be there forever, and it's going to be difficult to evict them. So, what does you also explained? What is the Bhutan's dilemma really? But as far as the Chinese attitude is concerned, the expansionist mindset, do you see that stopping at just claiming Beul, or they would push even Doklam further, push Bhutan, and what could India do under the circumstances really?
In June 2017, India intervened. So, for China, they'll be more careful and maybe think twice. As I mentioned, the commander of the Western Theater Command, General Zhao Zhongqi, who retired in December, visited all these places, knew every inch of the border, and he decided to go for Doklam, thinking that India would not react. But now they have seen that India has reacted in Doklam, India has reacted in Pangong, in Galwan, in Hot Spring or Depsang. So I think they will think twice. But certainly they can take more land in east of the Chumbi Valley and develop more that Payul and consider forever part of the Chinese territory. Regarding Chaktang, it's more difficult because, as you mentioned, they may claim the entire Tawang or the entire Arunachal, but they will have some problem to reach
there. Yes, to reach there. Yeah, you're right. So actually, this is the whole issue with the Chinese mindset. As I said, the land grab is not just in Bhutan. They have tried that in Eastern Ladakh very recently, last year. They have been trying that in Arunachal Pradesh, what they call South Tibet, and of course South China Sea. One final question, Claude Arpi. You've been watching the Chinese, especially in the Tibetan Autonomous Region, in Tibet. What do you think is going to be the Chinese end game, as far as is there an end game in Tibet, or they will continue to colonize Tibet, Hanization of Tibet as we call it? Where does it go? Where does it stand right now?
I think they are extremely nervous, because why do they need to do out of these 965 villages, there is about between 100 and 200 right on the border. One, for example, in Lepo village, which is 4 or 5 kilometers from Kenzimane, the last Indian post in Tawang sector. So why do they need to build this village? And also, I have to mention that they have built one village in India's territory in Longju, which is,
Mm.
according to the Survey of India map, which is on India's territory. And previously, they built one on the along the Amochu in
Bhutan.
Pangda in Bhutan. So these villages in Payul are the third example of villages that they always built along the river. The
Right.
in Longju along the Tsarichu, the Pangda along the Amochu, and here the Pasong Chu. So. But why do they need to build these 300 villages? And of course, they're going to change the demography of these villages. They already, most of the workers who are building these villages come from the mainland, from China. These
Right.
people will stay. These people will marry Tibetans. Now there was the rumors that China is going to raise unit in the PLA fully with Tibetans. I'm not sure if they can do it because they don't really trust the Tibetan, but the first people who have been recruited are mixed people, half Tibetan,
Right.
half Han. So if they change the demography of the border, because if you put a village in Pangda or Longju or in Payul, there's nobody before. Nobody,
Right.
I mean, not few others here and there. You built a village for 200-300 people. It means you have to bring the people. Either you bring them from other places in Tibet or you bring them from mainland. So there'll be 50-50. There'll be half good Tibetans who are following Xi Jinping and Communist Party. The whole things to me appears that China is nervous because why to have so many villages, to invest so many billions of dollars in building these villages and bringing electricity, bringing Wi-Fi, breaking. They say it's for alleviating poverty. But I just want to say that you monitor better someone in a village like that, which is built from nothing. You give them Wi-Fi, you give them everything. It's much better to for them
Monitor
to
and watch.
monitor the nomads or the farmers, which are more difficult when they are in a remote place like the Chantang, the northern plains, northern Tibet, and like that. They couldn't. But this morning there was an article in Chinese press saying that up to 2 million of people have been trained herders and farmers and relocated in different places where they are happier and they have more facilities. But this facility means that the big brother is watching you much
Constantly.
closely.
Yes, you're right, absolutely. So China is nervous, and therefore all this is happening. But this will, of course, give us more opportunities to discuss the Chinese attitude, expansionist mindset. All that will happen, but we will come back to you whenever such discussions are due. But for the moment, Claude Arpi, thanks for your insights, your knowledge, your entire historical perspective that you bring to the discussion. That gives us the idea that neighbors around China have to be as careful as possible because the Chinese are always out to grab land. Thank you for being here. Thank you, viewers, for joining in large numbers. In fact, the on a day when Monday is the beginning of a week, still people are joining us live. Shows how much interest all of you have in such topics that we discuss on StratNews Global. Do keep supporting us. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel. You know what it is, and of course our social media handles. And keep sending feedback, keep sending comments so that we can take up some of the subjects, some of the suggestions that you make, and of course bring to you as many informative discussions as possible in the remaining days of the week, or going forward even earlier, even later in this month. Thank you for watching, and we'll come back again for the next time. Goodbye until the next time.
Thank you.